and welcome back, everybody. It's right on 10 o'clock, and I'm delighted to welcome you back to the second session today. I'm Fiona Famulak, President and CEO of the BC Chamber of Commerce, and I'm speaking with you today from the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. And as an immigrant to Canada, I acknowledge that Indigenous peoples have always been here. Everyone has a role to play in reconciliation, and I'm incredibly grateful to live, work, and play on their lands. So for those of you who attended the first session this morning, the keynote with Todd Corrigal, the CEO of the Prince George Chamber of Commerce, you'll have heard about the good work that the Chamber there is doing and has signed a partnership agreement with the Kwikwi First Nation. It was a fascinating conversation. It could have gone for 2 hours as opposed to 45 minutes. And I'm delighted to come back and moderate a discussion this morning between our panelists. Now, you will see that I think on the agenda, it notes that Todd would also join us for this conversation. There's been a slight change in the plan, and I'm delighted to say that the conversation is going to focus with our two panelists, who I will introduce momentarily, on the conversation around the importance of community agreements and the creation and benefits of urban reserves. So a very focused conversation that may go to 11:30 because there's lots to discuss, or it may finish early. We'll just see how the conversation goes. We'll go with the flow. So this year's forum is focused on building and maintaining a resilient energy sector here in BC that is shared with the rest of Canada and also with the world. It brings together leaders from a variety of organizations who come with a wealth of knowledge, experience, and insight that will help inform the conversations that we're having today and in the future and the decisions that we make. I'm therefore honored to moderate this session entitled Reconciliation Through First Nations and Community Agreements. And I know that the next hour and a half is going to be a conversation with our panelists that is thoughtful and also thought-provoking. And the leaders that we're here to welcome today are Mayor Laurie Ackerman, who is the Mayor of Fort St. John. Good morning and welcome, Mayor Ackerman. And also Owen Bloor. Owen is a land use planner with the Doig River First Nation. Good morning, Owen, and welcome to both of you. Thank you for making time for this conversation. So as the moderator of this conversation, my job is really to squeeze as much nuggets, little gold nuggets, out of the conversation in the next 90 minutes to enable it to be as expansive as we would like it to be, and also to respond to any questions that our audience members place. And to that, I will remind our audience that you will see the Q&A tab up at the top right-hand corner of your screen. Please load up your questions, and I will get to as many of those questions as possible between now and 11:30. So before I launch into questions, though, I just want to frame up the conversation with Mayor Ackerman and also with Owen. The preface of this discussion is that municipalities, communities, and nations are working together to build sustainable partnerships through community projects and urban reserves. And there's no question that there is a huge amount of very, very good work underway. We know, I listen to Chief Charlene Gale a lot, and I've been privileged enough to host her at a few BC Chamber events. And we know through her work and the work of the First Nations Major Projects Coalition that they are working tirelessly to help their members secure equity stakes in major projects undertaken on their lands. We know that a number of organizations in the energy sector work very closely with their Indigenous partners, and we heard from Kyle Giddens of TC Energy and Coastal GasLink this morning that only just in March of 2022, they signed equity option agreements with 20 Indigenous partners across the Coastal GasLink project corridor. Really good work there. And then we heard from Todd Corrigal this morning also about communities like his, Prince George, and others who are reaching out and having meaningful, thoughtful conversations with their Indigenous partners and signing partnership agreements that lay the foundation for the work around reconciliation that is really leadership work and really a beacon of light as we all move forward. So I want to start the conversation by kind of putting a stake in the ground and acknowledging that there is a lot of good work underway. Collectively, we're doing good work. Collectively, we're at different stages too. And there's a lot to learn, and the journey is long. So with that frame, that's really what I want to explore with the two of you over the next hour or so. And Owen, I'll maybe start with you. The preface of the conversation is municipalities, communities, nations are working closely to create the partnerships, the sustainable partnerships. And we know that in my speaking with you just yesterday, urban reserves is a fairly young concept. The first urban reserve was created, I think, only in the 1980s. So it's a fairly new concept. From your perspective as a land use planner, can you perhaps just start from ground zero? What is an urban reserve? And what is your perspective on the progress that we've made since the 1980s? And what do you think the role of the urban reserve will be going forward?
Well, I'll start with the last part first because urban reserves are going to be very essential moving forward. Not only because of encroachment from municipalities upon reserves that were at one time fairly, a significant distance away from them. Just cities like Kelowna, for example, growing up around West Bank in that area. So they're going to be very important. From the beginning, the process from the beginning is very dependent upon, like I said, where you're situated and where you're looking to build your reserve or create your reserve. Kelowna and in that area, West Bank expanded because of that, right? So they created urban reserves because the municipality, just was encroaching on their land. So we, on the other hand, bought a piece of land that was fee simple and put it through what's called the addition to reserve process, whereby you apply to the government of Canada to create this piece of property as reserve property. It's a very there's some fairly significant thresholds that need to be met in the process. One of them being an agreement with the adjacent municipality, whether it be a city or a regional district, to ensure that the services they provide their citizens are provided to the urban reserve. Aside from that, it's a very complex and detailed process that, like I said, it's dependent upon where it is, what kind of land it is, are there right of ways involved? Do you have to form agreements with different agencies of the province? There's all kinds of agreements that you have to form in order to create this parcel. So, yeah.
I want to come back to you. I'm going to give Laurie the opportunity to speak just for a second. I want to come back to you because I know that the process, just learning from you, is quite a complex process. And I want to drill down on that a little bit, just to help us all understand. But before I do, Mayor Ackerman, I want to come to you. And as the as the elected official on the panel, where is the city of Fort St. John in its reconciliation journey vis-a-vis the development of the urban reserve in your community?
So I think that Fort St. John has made great strides over the last several years. This has been a real process for us. So when you look at First Nations and you look at local governments, the analogy that I use is we are like two neighbors living side by side with a good neighbor fence between us. And we have to figure out how to build a gate. And because the First Nations have the federal acts that they must follow, and we have provincial acts that we must follow. And everyone in this conference knows that those don't always blend well together. So it's been, we signed an MOU back in, oh heavens, I think, and it was 2009 to actually start working on some kind of economic opportunity together. And so we have learned how to blaze that trail and build that gate. So it's been a journey of learning, and we are not done yet by any stretch of the imagination. But the ability to build that relationship of trust, when you've got the chief's cell phone number and you can text him, and he can text me. I think that's really, really important. We were courageous and we took the steps because it was the right thing to do.
Absolutely, and thank you for naming the qualities, meaning the importance of the relationship building at the outset. When Todd Corrigal presented earlier this morning, we spoke about the exact same thing: the courage to reach out and to have the conversation, the courage to be uncomfortable about the conversation, and to listen. You need to have that foundation and that discomfort in order to build trust, which is foundational to every relationship that we have. So congratulations to both the city of Fort St. John and also to Doig River First Nation for trailblazing, really, because I believe, Owen, that the Doig River First Nation Urban Reserve is going to be, is it the first or the only one north of Williams Lake, I believe? So it's a trailblazer.
Yeah. If I'm correct, I know Williams Lake either has or is in the process of developing one. Like I said, Kelowna is kind of our go-to when we talk about urban reserves. And so, we are in especially in the northeastern section of British Columbia, we are the first to do this. So
congratulations. And when I hear Mayor Ackerman mention that the opportunity really began in a conversation back in 2009, what's that, 13 years ago? I mean, that's relatively short, but at the same time, that's a long process, and moving fairly quickly. I think the urban reserve designation has it been awarded or is it about to be awarded?
No, it was actually April 26th was the official creation date. We did a formal announcement on the past Aboriginal Day.
Only 2 days ago. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So it's been officially announced to the community, and so we're looking to move forward.
Congratulations to both of you. So Owen, if I can come back to that then. So the designation of the urban reserve has been announced. Yes. So what's planned for the urban reserve? Like, what is the vision for the urban reserve, and how is it going to benefit First Nations?
Well, the biggest and foremost thing that will benefit First Nations is that we're going to develop a gas station that will be partnered with a First Nation based company, where we can offer First Nations status First Nation members tax-free, essentially tax-free. We've got a couple of different formats we're working on. So it'll be either tax reduced or tax-free fuel and cigarettes and that kind of thing, which every reserve sells tobacco on reserve, but being able to pick it up while you're in town at an event or just shopping for groceries or whatever is going to be huge for the members, of the surrounding nations. And there's in the northeast of British Columbia, I believe, between Fort Nelson and Fort St. John Chetwynd area, there's 7,500 status cards. So, yeah, it'll be a huge benefit to all of them because everybody in the area travels through or to Fort St. John, right? So
absolutely, yeah.
Will
the urban reserve have a residential component and other commercial components in addition to the gas station?
Yeah, so there's a potential so what our concept is right now, and this is just concept because of course it's dependent upon what developers approach you. So we're open to offers and proposals, but currently we do have plans for it's about 3 or 4 different buildings. One of them being our gas station, which would also encompass an office for Doig River, and then a complex that's essentially health workers, so some medical care facilities, dentists, doctors, that type of thing. And then we do have one building that we are going to probably do a mixed use kind of building, where the bottom floor is commercial and the second floor would either be residential or office, and then the third floor and fourth floor be residential. Anything above the second floor be residential. So
love it. So what kind of timeline are we looking at, Owen, to bring that vision to life?
Well, we just formalized our TLE settlement, which is also another huge moment for Doig River First Nations. And TLE, for those that don't know, is Treaty Land Entitlement Settlement. So it's just it's to make up for the losses that that the members faced when they lost their original reserve in Montney area in 1952. So with that comes a significant amount of money that we could put towards development. However, there's one major thing that needs to be done. Land needs to be designated for use, and you can do that either through designation vote or through land code. And we've spent the last year and a half working towards passing a land code. So that's the route we've chosen, and hopefully we tentatively plan on voting on land code this fall. So if everything was to run smoothly, year and a half, we could start turning dirt.
That's encouraging. That's great. That's moving along. Yeah. Marakaman, I want to pivot to you just for a minute. So we've heard from Owen what the benefit of an urban reserve is to our Indigenous communities. What's the benefit to the community of Fort St. John and also the business community of Fort St. John following the creation of an urban reserve?
Yeah, the First Nations have been here since time immemorial. To have them invest in your community is huge. They're not going anywhere. There's so many investors that will pop in and out of your community, and then you've got absentee landlords and that kind of stuff who really don't respect the growth of the community. This is completely different. And you've got people who have been born and raised here, and they've come here to our city to create what will benefit them and bring them forward on the uneven economic path that they have been on for well over a century. So for us, that's huge. And we have already 2 other First Nations and a third one who's interested in fee simple land. So Prophet River owns land inside the city, as does Halfway, and Blueberry is interested. And so we will continue to work on this path. It's, I think it's wonderful. You know, I have a sister that lives in Chilliwack. There's First Nations land there that is developed. It's a beautiful, you know, you can look at, you know, the North Cowichan area. There's land developed there. There's a lot of pride in their communities. And so we're really looking forward to this commercial and residential mixed use.
Congratulations. Yeah, it's great leadership. I mean, again, to the two of you, thank you to you and your respective organizations and First Nations to take the lead and to make this happen. We spoke with Todd earlier this morning about the groundbreaking work that he's done through his Chamber of Commerce in Prince George and leading the way. And we spoke about the fact that it's not just the right thing to do. It's absolutely the right thing to do, but it's also part of your community's brand going forward. You're signaling to everyone who's paying attention that we are in lockstep with our Indigenous partners. We are working with them. We are open for business. We are, it acts as a magnet also, almost. And so it's more than just words. It's you're walking the talk, which I think is really, really important as we all move forward. So again, thank you for your leadership.
Well, and so I just to expand on that, I think it's important for us to showcase to the other levels of government that reconciliation really should be reconciliation, and to actually dig in, be courageous, get the work done. Yes, it takes time, but honestly, we can achieve, I think, a greater level of reconciliation at the local level than they are at the provincial or the federal government levels.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I just want to, okay, so I'm going to, if I can just jump off that comment then, Mayor Ackerman. Oh, and I do want to come back to you to the process in a moment or two. Yeah. But since Mayor Ackerman has invited the conversation, I want to chat with you a little bit about the education process that the City of Fort St. John must have embarked on back, starting in 2009 all the way through, because there must have been decisions for which you didn't have the information, but yet you were needing to make decisions on new concepts, on legislation, and so on and so forth. Talk to me a little bit about what that process looked like from a council's perspective, and the learnings, the education that you needed to embark on as a council.
Yeah, so we figured it out pretty quickly that we didn't have the knowledge that we needed to have. At one point in my, along the way, I know that when someone came to me and said, "Why don't you have a totem pole here?" I was able to say that's not part of the culture of the First Nations in Northeast BC. But I didn't understand a lot of the history. So it really did require us to go back and understand and learn the history. So there's university courses that you can take online. There's a book, Thomas R. Berger, One Man's Justice. And he wrote a chapter on every one of the cases that he worked on. And there's one called The Montney Treasure. So if you are working in Northeast BC, you must read that chapter. Thomas R. Berger, One Man's Justice, and it is the Montney Treasure chapter. You'll buy the book for one chapter unless you want to read the rest, go ahead, but that's the one chapter you need to understand. And it really is eye-opening on how the First Nations were pushed out of the Montney area and split into two reserves. I wasn't aware of all of that history beforehand. I knew that they had been one, but I didn't know why they had been split into two. So, we learned about these things. We got involved. We went to the cultural days. We read the Indian Act. I've got the Indian Act. I've read the 21 things you may not know about the Indian Act. there's such significant things that you learn along the way. And there's, members of Doig River Council who, whenever I have a question, we've created that safe environment where I can ask stupid questions and get an honest and sincere answer about it. And that's really important to do, is to create that relationship so you've got that safe environment. The other one that was just we were actually moving along quite well, and I'm sure Owen remembers this, and all of a sudden this agreement came to us, and our staff had gone on and taken I wouldn't say a course on it, but understood what land code is. And that's something that Owen had mentioned. Council had no idea what this was. And it was like, whoa, you're wanting us to vote on it, but we haven't learned about this. So it's really important for members of council to be engaged and to take these courses, lessons, sit in on the sessions that the staff are sitting in so that we understand it, because we're the ones that have to explain it to the public. So that was the one hiccup that we had. And
you overcome it.
We did. Yeah, we actually got together over at our festival plaza, and land code was explained to us, and we all went, oh, okay, that's perfect. And so we had already decided to approve it in principle once we had that session and understood it. So we were able to sign the agreement that day.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great intel. I made a note about the book, the Thomas R. Berger book, because we're in a process right now at the BC Chamber of Commerce where our board wants to become educated. Our team needs to become educated, myself also. And we want to be leading by example, but we want to be, and there's a lot of information out there, but we want to be selective and to look at the right resources and to learn from the right resources. So I'm going to add that to our reading list. That sounds really helpful. And because I think it really starts with education. And to your point earlier, we need to be comfortable with the uncomfortableness of it. We don't know everything. We can't relate to what our First Nations partners have gone through. Our role is to listen and to be curious and to learn from our partners, and it gets back to that, the importance of the relationship of trust, which is the foundational piece. Thank you for your comments. That's been really fascinating in terms of how you learn and continuing to learn. And I want to come back to the process around the creation of the urban reserve, because I'm just thinking from our audience perspective, there may be folks from our municipalities in the audience today, from our business community. What is the biggest hurdle that is faced by the First Nations and the city when it comes to the addition to the reserve land? Like, what is the process? Because I believe, my understanding, and it's again very, very basic, the addition to reserve policy was created back in the 1970s as a result of trying to fill a gap in the Indian Act and federal legislation. It was updated in 2016. What does the 2016 policy look like? Is it working? Are there gaps still that need to be addressed? What's your perspective on that?
It's very dependent upon your location, because I guess the biggest hurdle is muddling through that consultation process with the various agencies that you may or may not be involved with. So for us, we were pretty lucky in that, like Mayor Ackerman said, pretty much every First Nation around here owns land in Fort St. John and would at some point like to convert it to reserve. They're just lacking the capacity to go through it. So it begins with, essentially you apply to Canada, and that's where the big hurdle starts. You apply to Canada. I will be honest, it is much easier to work with your local government because they're right there. And if we get mad at each other, we can go to each other's office and say, "Excuse me, but we need to talk." Not that that ever happened, but that's there, right? And we do have the phone and the communication, and so you don't have that with the feds or the province even. We were very blessed when we began this process that the person working for Indigenous Services Canada was very supportive of what we were doing and very, very involved and wanted to see it succeed and succeed quickly.
Mhm.
So, like I say, it's dependent upon. So one of the big factors is you have to do an environmental site assessment. You begin with a phase one, and then depending on what's found in that phase one, you progress to a phase two. In our case, we actually had to do a phase three because the phase two was somewhat questionable, and so that was a big hurdle. Not every nation has the capacity to deal with that kind of endeavor, or even the policy side of it, like knowing your parameters, knowing whether you're in or not, or what you've got to test for, and so you're kind of reliant upon contractors a lot. Even for us, I mean, I'm fortunate. I've got a undergrad in environmental planning, so I did some environmental consulting years ago. So I do know a little bit about the process for site assessments, and so that helped us. But yeah, I will be honest. The federal government in general is your biggest hurdle because they dictate what thresholds and parameters you have to meet in order for them to agree to transfer the land, right? So what a fee simple parcel would require being transferred from the province to the federal government. That's also a hurdle. You have to negotiate agreements with the province in order to do that. BC Hydro, TELUS, all of those parties. So yeah, it's a very long, drawn out process. You've got to survey the land, even though it's already been surveyed.
Yeah.
You've got to have it redone just so that Canada's accepting of it. Like I said, the biggest hurdle is Canada because they're the one that sets out or dictates, I guess, more than sets out, but dictates whether you've met their requirements.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It sounds complex, and it sounds like there's many parties at the table. They may or may not be communicating with one another. So I can only imagine the complexity and the time that it takes. I'm wondering, because you had such a good relationship with City of Fort St. John, was Doig River and the City of Fort St. John able to go together to further the conversation with the feds, or was Doig River really dealing with the feds on its own?
For the most part, we deal with the feds on our own. What benefited us with respect to the City of Fort St. John was the speed at which we got the MSA created and signed, and because that's also, like I said, it's a requirement.
MSA is the Master Service Agreement, or what's the?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
got
it. So there's two: Master Service Agreement and Municipal Service Agreement.
Got it.
This one is a municipal. We are working on a Master Service Agreement with the regional district for some other parcels that we're converting.
Right. Right. So, gosh, it's a complex process. So you've spoken on about the lack of capacity within the First Nation for some of these conversations. Mayor Ackerman, I want to ask you the same question. Presumably, it's not just the First Nation that lacks capacity, given the complexity of the conversation and the process. How does the city step up with the resources and the capacity that it needs to navigate through?
Well, I think that what we did was we made it a priority in our work plan. Mm-hmm. And so when you've got the desire and the dedication of council to make a difference, then it becomes a priority of staff, and that's simply a matter of governance and making sure that that happens. So we had some staff that really dug into it and worked closely, understood that when it becomes IR land, the municipality, other than what has been negotiated through that strong relationship that we have built, we don't have a lot of control on what happens on that IR land afterwards. But if the spirit and the intention is there, then it's very similar to a CD zone. And we do have CD zones in the city, so comprehensive development zones. And those comprehensive development zones with other developers, actually, we're giving up a little bit of our control with the development, and there's a lot of trust with those as well. So anyone in the municipal arena would be familiar with those if they've got development happening. But they're absolutely right. It's not just the First Nations communities that don't have capacity. I know that some of the municipalities don't have capacity. I know I've had conversations with some of my colleagues who have asked, like, how did you do this? We've got, council members on our regional district working on, this kind of stuff within their community. And I said, this can't be a regional district committee if the IR land is going to be in the city, because the municipal council has to approve this. So it's not easy, but I think that, what we have managed to do together here can certainly, we've blazed that trail. Our municipal service agreement, by the way, is a public document. We do review it every year because it is, the services that we provide are attached to the tax rate. And so as we look at our tax rates each and every year, so too the municipal service agreement is reviewed. So I'm happy to share the link to that municipal service agreement with Cheryl, and she can send that out to everyone and take a look at it. I think it's a fabulous document.
Thank you. If you wouldn't mind sharing that with Cheryl, that would be great. Yeah. And also, while I'm at it, I just saw a quick question to remind us of the name of the book by Thomas R. Berger. So if you could also provide that to Cheryl, that would be really helpful too, I think.
Absolutely.
There we go.
Yeah, Thomas R. Berger, One Man's Justice.
Yes. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Let's all get a copy. Absolutely. Thank you. So this conversation has been going on since 2009. The urban reserve was declared, or I don't know what the word is, declared, awarded, acknowledged in April of 2022. So Owen, what are the next steps from Doig River's perspective? What are the priorities for the next few months, couple of years?
Well, a couple of months wise, continue working on the ATR process for the lands just south of Fort St. John. We've got 2 parcels down there that we'd like to convert, and they're in the process of it. They're, I would say, over 50% done.
And will those also be for urban reserve?
Well, not really, because they're not urban. They're south of Fort St. John, close to urban, but not really.
But not quite, right.
So what we're terming them is cultural tourism lands, and that's how we propose developing them. We'd like to develop a campground with a cultural center that to kind of provide some information about the area and the importance of the area to the Doig Nation. It's right around the Site C Dam, and the Site C Dam is on some burial grounds for Doig River First Nation. So it's a fairly significant area, and so we hope to tie in with BC Hydro like we have at Sequoia, the caves out at and the museum out at Charlie Lake. So we kind of hope doing that. And so in order to achieve all of this, like I said earlier, our next goal and big project is land code. And what land code does is it removes 44 sections of the Indian Act and allows Doig River First Nation access to its land and finances uh, on their own without having to go to ISK to request it. So currently, we could develop. Well, no, we can't because we can't. We got to designate it somehow, some way. But if we were to start developing right now without having land code, um, we have to ask Canada. We submit a proposal, they say yes or no, and then we have to ask for funding.
Right.
So, yeah.
And that feeds into the process that you described just a few minutes ago of being complex and time consuming and not moving nearly quickly
Yeah,
enough. So,
yeah.
so would the removal of those 44 sections allow the ATR, the addition to reserve process to move more quickly then? Would that facilitate that process?
Not really, no. What land code does is it removes those sections of the Indian Act from reserve land and only reserve land.
Right.
So the ATR process is something that's outside of that.
Outside of that, okay.
Yeah.
So you've got some. So I'm fascinated by how entrepreneurial Doig River First Nation is. I mean, you've got plans, you've got vision, and you're making it happen in partnership with the city of Fort St. John. So again, congratulations and thank you for your leadership. Because it takes a partner to help facilitate those conversations too, right? So Mayor Ackerman, from a city's perspective, what are the city's short-term priorities in terms of facilitating these kinds of conversations with Doig River and other First Nations?
Yeah, so I think once you go through this educational process and you understand how the First Nations are required to operate and manage themselves according to the federal legislations and regulations, you see very quickly that there is a lot on their plate, They don't have, we don't have nearly the expectations on our shoulders that they have. The social expectations, education, healthcare, that kind of stuff. And so we are looking at some signage. We're updating our signage policy so that we can be inclusive of the First Nations language. We have a committee that works together on bylaws, and those bylaws will be sent to Doig River First Nations for either a heads up, this is what we're doing, or if you're creating your land code, this might be something to consider. We're trying to find that seamless environment as people move through the city. They don't know if they're going into Ireland or off Ireland. They shouldn't know. But the other thing that we've recognized through this whole process is that a municipal service agreement doesn't have to be on a plot of land inside the city. We can create a municipal service agreement that addresses water services. We can create a municipal service agreement that that ensures that they have fire service, training volunteers, because we do have a fire training center here. And so we can assist with a lot of these things that then just takes that off of their plate. They don't have to worry about it. I think it's important for us to really start having more conversations about what we can do. I know that once we signed the municipal service agreement, I did ask Chief McCadahey, okay, now what? And he said, we just keep moving forward. We have a community foundation, and it just became a charitable status. And so we're working on that. We have Councillor Brittany Brinkworth, who sits on that board of directors, and creating the policies, the goalposts for donors as well as donees. They must kick the ball in between the uprights, and those uprights are truth and reconciliation principles.
Mhm.
They are ESG and the Sustainable Development Goals for communities. And so I think it's really important for us to really walk that walk together with First Nations. Not to mention the elders of Joy really worked hard for us on that community foundation. And so while it is the North Peace Community Foundation, the tagline, it's for the future of the people, and that came from the elders. So that's really a wonderful collaboration that got started. There's so much that can be done once you start the conversation and build the relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really inspiring to listen to you in terms of who all has a role to play, and how everybody will move forward. To that point, and I don't have Todd on the line now, but I needed to ask him a little bit earlier. So we've spoken a lot about the relationship and the partnerships between Doig River First Nation and the city of Fort St. John. What is the role of the business community? Where does the business community plug into this? And by that, I mean the non-Indigenous business community, because I think the Indigenous business community, Owen, you've spoken really eloquently about the opportunities that are going to appear in the urban reserve, and that will benefit everybody, not of from all ethnicities. But the role of the small, medium, and large business community as we embark on our reconciliation journey, what is the role of it or will be in Fort St. John?
Well, I think first and foremost, they need to educate themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Because even to this day, I see comments on social media that just make my head spin and pop. And they come at it from a position of true ignorance. They're not aware. They are going off of the fact that they didn't learn this in school, therefore it must not be true. They really need to just shut that down for a bit, read some things, understand, get engaged. I think that the role that the Chamber of Commerce is taking as that information source for businesses. Just having sessions on this, lunch and learn, that kind of stuff, to really bring about an opportunity. Bring the local First Nations in to have the conversation about the facts as they are and how those facts have impacted that path that the First Nations have been on, that really has not been even, it has not been fair. And we own that because we are all treaty people. Our government signed the treaty with the First Nations. And so while we didn't sign it, we must take responsibility for where we're at. And I think it's so vitally important that the Chamber continues to host educational sessions, maybe not quite this big and complex, because I know that Cheryl's worked really hard on this, but smaller ones, just to bring that information to people across this region.
Absolutely. And I think we all have a role to play. Every Chamber of Commerce and Board of Trade across the province, there's just under 100 of them. And as I mentioned in the earlier presentation this morning, the Chambers of Commerce, like Prince George, like Nanaimo, and many of the Chambers of Commerce in the north, are doing really good work and leading the way with their Indigenous partners. We can all learn from that, rather than reinventing the wheel and duplicating effort. Let's learn from our partners, all of our partners, and to your point, ensure that we're putting out there the education that's necessary in accessible ways, so that everybody has an opportunity to become educated, because we all have a responsibility to play. We might not have been, and I'm myself included, I wasn't in Canada until 20 years ago, but I'm a Canadian now, an immigrant now, and I feel I have a responsibility. I know I have a responsibility in reconciliation, and as does this organization, and we take that responsibility seriously. So education is our first step to ensure that we become educated as a board of directors and as a staff and as a network. And then together we can help our business communities to get the access that they need.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to just kind of building on the need for education, and I'm sure you are asked a lot. How do we get started in this conversation? Like, how do we begin the conversations? What is your answer to that question when you're invited to help people become educated? Where do you point? How do you guide them?
Well, depending on who they are, like, so for example, for your organizations that are taking part in this, I would say reach out to your local First Nations, initiate a discussion, um, present them with your concerns. Be honest, be upfront. Don't be, like Lori said, don't be afraid to have that tough conversation, because the First Nations aren't. They're more than willing to, or at least Doig is, and I found this with most First Nations in this area. They're very willing to tell their story and their side of things, and inform you of various cultural traditions, aspects, concerns. So yeah, education is huge. Where I start the conversation is very dependent upon what their knowledge is on the situation, and what their concerns are. And I may offend a few people when I say this part, but quite often what we get presented with, and Lori's familiar with this, because, and I can say this because I'm born and raised here. I'm a redneck. So quite often the image of a reserve is burning barrels and couches beside the road, and you know, loud and ugly and unkempt. And that's just not the case anymore. Um, First Nations people are proud of their reserves and proud of where they live. They're very proud of their land. So yeah, just reaching out and connecting with them and saying, hey, what's this, or how do we get around this, or how can we work together? They love to work together, you know. But one thing I will say, listen when you are in these discussions. Listen to what they're saying. Hear what they're saying. Don't just give the word about oh yeah, got it. Don't play the game. That usually happens.
Yeah.
So yeah, just talk.
Wise words. Thank you. And yeah, thank you for that. Your openness, and I believe most First Nations, at least in my experience, everyone is very open to having conversations and are inviting us in to sit with them, to have conversations, to listen to their stories. And we need to be courageous enough and open enough. Todd, called it out earlier this morning. Engage from your heart. Engage for the right reasons. And that authenticity and that trust will shine through, and will form part of the good foundation that we all need to go forward. So thank you for your guidance there, Owen. I'm conscious of time, and I'm gonna say we have 5 more minutes probably. I'm just checking to see that there are questions. I don't see any questions from the audience. So again, a gentle reminder to the audience, if you have questions, please drop them into the Q&A tab on the right hand side of your screen, and we'll get to them. And meantime, I'm going to keep asking questions because I've got lots of questions. So as we begin to wrap up this session, Mayor Ackerman, and also to Owen, I always like to ask the question of the panelists: if you had one message that you would like to share with the audience today, to take away and apply in the future, what would that nugget be? And Mayor Ackerman, I'll start with you, and then I'll end with Owen's thoughts.
Sure. And I'm going to go back to something Todd said as well, and I know everybody wrote it down about creating an agreement that is vague and powerful.
Mm.
And he's absolutely right. And I think when he means vague, it is like all encompassing. Like you're open to having conversations about several things that may pop up. And being powerful means you were really going to put some strength behind this and you're serious about it. And I just want to make sure that if people are creating policy, whether you are a chamber of commerce or a business or whether you're a local government, you need to ensure that the wording of that law is reflective of the spirit of the intent. And it must stand the test of time. And I will give you an example. The treaty that was signed here spoke about the right to hunt and fish. And so when that was signed about 123 years ago, the right to hunt and fish gave the First Nations the right to hunt and fish. What it didn't elaborate on was that was their economy, that was their food source, that was, their clothing, that was everything to them to be able to have that animal, and they used every bit of it, right? As bureaucracy changed, because bureaucracy takes that policy and uses reasonable interpretation, right now it's, well, they had the right to hunt and fish, just like I have the right to hunt and fish, but if I don't get anything, I can go to Safeways. That did not stand the test of time, and bureaucracy missed the boat on that. And so you need to ensure that whatever the wording is, that it will stand that test of time, because we now understand, and the Blueberry River First Nations case confirmed that you've got an issue.
Thank you for that clarification, and thank you for reminding me of Todd's comment there about having a vague and powerful agreement. I think it's a really strong statement right there, and I think the vagueness also, as he mentioned just towards the end of his presentation, is not prescriptive, because they don't want to straitjacket any of the partners into certain things. That the relationship and how the partnership agreement evolves is going to be an ongoing process, that we can't just pin down in black and white today. So I think it gives the community of Prince George and the partners involved time and space to continue to learn and to continue to evolve and move forward. So thank you for that. So your nugget that you would like to share with the audience, if you had 30 seconds, what would that nugget be?
For me, I would say honor the agreement, or honor the spirit in which the agreement was made. That's one thing that we've been able to do with Fort St. John. So, and don't be shy. Don't be afraid to ask the tough questions, do it respectfully, but don't be afraid, because they'll more than happy to clarify or tell you, no, you got it right, or no, this is where you're wrong.
Absolutely.
It's just about reaching out and connecting.
Well said. And I'm going to close the session on those words. Thank you, Owen. It is almost 11 o'clock and Cheryl has come back on screen. Cheryl, I don't see any other questions from the audience. So I'll wrap up this session by first of all saying a sincere thank you to Mayor Laurie Ackerman and also Owen Bloor. Thank you for your time, for your insight, for your leadership as you make the way forward towards building the first urban reserve north of Williams Lake, and no doubt many other community projects that have been lined up there. So thank you for your time. This brings the session reconciliation through First Nations and community agreements to a close. I've learned a ton. I've learned an awful lot as I prepared for this conversation today, and also in the last hour in conversation with Mayor Ackerman and Owen. So to that I say a sincere and thank you. I'm very grateful for what I've learned from the two of you today, and also from Todd a little bit earlier this morning. So with that, I'll wrap up. I wish you all a great rest of the day. Stay well, stay healthy, don't go catching COVID-19. And I'll hand back to Cheryl. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fiona. Thanks, Mayor Ackerman, and also to Owen. I actually jumped on because I wanted to join part of the conversation that you guys were having. So I am going to just like backtrack a little bit because I just want to myself say that the Chamber is working towards some of the initiatives that you guys have talked about for the last little bit. And what I'm learning also through Todd and through some of the things that you guys have mentioned are giving me some really good ideas in terms of the direction that we take. And a couple of the things that, I'm learning about is we don't want to develop these ideas moving forward about how we're going to build reconciliation. We need to do that in partnership and, have that be a mutual discussion. And, that's some of the things that we're working on for sure with our partners and our Treaty 8 partners here is being part of having us all be part of the conversation, not trying to create a conversation. So I really appreciate that. And, one of the things that has always sort of been on the foundation of a lot of the things I do is that if we're not doing this with a genuine integrity and that this is meaningful and has value for everybody, then is it really worth doing? And I'm not prepared to just work on things that don't provide value and aren't honest and genuine from the foundation forward. So those are critical things that I see moving forward with those partnerships that you guys have all touched on. So I appreciate that so much. We have so much to learn in all of these conversations. And, but I find it's growing. My knowledge is growing, my connections are growing, my partnerships are growing, and we're evolving through this together, which is so exciting. And there's just so much potential and I love it. I love learning about all of this and working through this with everybody and building a bigger, more collaborative connection and network that we're gonna create amazing things. That's how I feel. And I look forward for this both to benefit the Chamber network, which is learning about all of this together, but also to benefit the community and the business community. I think when we talk about reconciliation, it always seems to be talking about industry and land on this giant scale. And yet there's so much work to happen to heal hearts and heal culture just in our community and just within people ourselves that don't have that big picture, but have just one-on-one relationships. And I think that that's where we start with a lot of these things that the Chamber is trying to work on. And it contributes to so much of small businesses, how we can help each other, how we can help the community. And Mayor Ackerman is years ahead of this, working on this with the community. And the Chamber, we're catching up, and we're going to do the work that we need to do to help develop this as well. So I really appreciate the conversations that have happened today. Really appreciate the conversation with Todd this morning, with you, Owen, and explaining more so I can learn more. And I can't thank you all enough and appreciate what you've done. Fiona, I know when we started talking about you doing this session, and you brought up that this is not something that happens in Vancouver and, might be a little bit out of the wheelhouse, and we talked about what a great way to learn this more than anything than to just dive right in. So I appreciate that you took that challenge and just dove right in, and here we are, and we're all better for it. So thank you so much for taking that challenge.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, and I'm just blathering on now, so sorry about that. And I feel very grateful and appreciate very much the time that you all have taken to participate in this conversation. So thank you so much. And I wish you all a great day. And I'll be seeing some of you this evening even. So thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Carol, and thanks everybody. Take good
See you.
care.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.